Intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Let's now shift our focus to the Israel-Hamas war that continues to rage 3 months after the horrific Hamas terror attacks that took place in Israel on the 7th of October. Now, who was Saleh al-Arouri? That is the question that is being asked today. Why? Well, here's why. Israel's war against Hamas has reached the Lebanese capital, Beirut. On Tuesday, an Israeli strike killed Hamas's deputy leader, Saleh al-Arouri, along with his bodyguards. The strike hit a Hamas office in Beirut's southern suburbs, a stronghold of Lebanon's Iran-backed Hezbollah movement. The strike has added to persistent fears that the 3-month-old Israel-Hamas war could escalate into a wider conflagration in the region. Israel has long accused Aruri of lethal attacks on its citizens, but a Hamas official said he was also at the heart of negotiations over the outcome of the Gaza war and the release of hostages conducted by Qatar and Egypt. While Israel has not officially confirmed its role in the killing, Mark Regev, a senior advisor to Israel's prime minister, said whoever did this did a surgical strike against the Hamas leadership. The Israeli army today said it is prepared for any scenario, stoking fears that the war in the Gaza Strip could boil over as we set into wider regional conflict. The Israeli army spokesperson Daniel Hagari did not directly comment on the killing but said the military was in a very high state of readiness in all arenas, in defense and offense, and he said we are highly prepared for any scenario. Israel has previously announced the deaths of Hamas commanders and officials during the war in Gaza, but Aruri is the most high-profile figure to be killed, and his death came in the first strike on the Lebanese capital since Israel-Hamas hostilities began. Now, Hamas has said that Aruri's death would not lead to its defeat, while its Lebanon-based ally Hezbollah has vowed that the killing will not go unpunished, calling it a serious assault on Lebanon and a dangerous development. Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati has condemned the killing and said it aims to draw Lebanon further into the war. So, just who was Saleh al-Arouri and why is his killing significant? Aruri was seen as a key player in the movement, masterminding its operations in the West Bank from exile in Syria, Turkey and Qatar, and finally Lebanon after long stints in Israeli prisons. As the Hamas group's senior official in Lebanon, he played a big role in cementing Hamas's relations with the Lebanese Shiite group Hezbollah and through it with Iran, the main backer for both these groups. Within Hamas, Aruri was described as a leading advocate of reconciliation between rival Palestinian factions, enjoying a good relationship with Fatah, the party of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, which holds sway in the West Bank. But when it came to the conflict with Israel, Aruri was seen as a hardliner. He helped found the group's military wing, the Izz el-Din al-Qassam brigades, and Israel accused him of orchestrating deadly attacks against its citizens over the years. Israel says Aruri was behind the kidnapping and killing of 3 Israeli teenagers in the West Bank in 2014, an act that triggered a 7-week Israeli assault on Gaza that left 2,100 Palestinians dead. From his early days as a student leader at Hebron University to his eventual position as deputy chairman of the Hamas political bureau, Saleh al-Arouri's journey was marked by violence, imprisonment and a tumultuous relationship with Israel. His death in an Israeli strike in Beirut comes as a defining moment in the escalating tensions in the Middle East. Arouri's ascent to the role of deputy chairman of the Hamas political bureau in 2017 solidified his standing as a key political figure within the organization. Accused by both Israel and the United States of overseeing Hamas's military operations in the occupied West Bank, his presence on the US list of terrorists since 2015 added an international dimension to his notoriety. Hamas and its allies, including Lebanon-based Hezbollah, as we said, have vowed retaliation, deepening concerns about the widening scope of this ongoing conflict. The strike has not only stirred tensions between Israel and Lebanon, but also drawn condemnation from the Lebanese Prime Minister, who fears further entanglement in the war. Meanwhile, the Times of Israel's Hebrew news portal Zaman Yisrael has reported that Israeli officials have had clandestine talks with the African nation of Congo and several others for the potential acceptance of Gaza immigrants. Israeli sources have been quoted as saying Congo will be willing to take in migrants and we're in talks with others. Israel's intelligence minister Gila Gamliel has been quoted as telling the Knesset, that's the Israeli parliament, and I quote, "At the end of the war, Hamas rule will collapse. There are no municipal authorities. The civilian population will be entirely dependent on humanitarian aid. There will be no work and 60% of Gaza's agricultural land will become security buffer zones." Saying that hatred will continue in Gaza and further attacks on Israel are only a matter of time, she added, "The Gaza problem is not just our problem. The world should support humanitarian immigration because that's the only solution I know." Now, on Tuesday, the United States condemned Israel's far-right ministers Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir for advocating the resettlement of Palestinians outside of Gaza. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller said this rhetoric is inflammatory and irresponsible. He said, "We've been clear, consistent and unequivocal that Gaza is Palestinian land and will remain Palestinian land with Hamas no longer in control of its future and with no terror groups able to threaten Israel." Now, Israeli Minister Smotrich has called for Palestinian residents to leave the besieged Gaza Strip and make way for Israelis who could, quote-unquote, make the desert bloom. Interior Minister Ben-Gvir has said the war in Gaza presents an opportunity to concentrate on encouraging the migration of the residents of Gaza. Such statements underscore fears among many in the Arab world that Israel wants to drive Palestinians out of the land where they envision a future state, repeating the mass dispossession of Palestinians when Israel was created in 1948. And in further trouble for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a new poll suggests that only 15% of Israelis want him to remain in office once the war in Gaza is over. Most seem to prefer Netanyahu's political rival and current war cabinet minister, centrist leader Benny Gantz, instead.
I will answer clearly, like I said in the statement. I won't respond to what was heard here or elsewhere. We are focused on the battle against Hamas from the beginning, and we will continue to do so. And we will update the public with instructions when needed, and we change and specify instructions accordingly in the noon, evening and morning, and will continue to do so. The public is also responsible and will continue to be as such, and we will update the instructions. These instructions are life-saving. With pride, with faith and persistence to continue the path of the martyrs, we mourn with our Palestinian people everywhere in...
The developments are extremely worrying, and I think this just really highlights what the Secretary General had just said about the dangers of the spillover of this conflict in the wider region. Well, we don't have all the details, and we don't have all the facts yet. We know that the Secretary General urges all parties to exercise maximum restraint and take urgent steps to de-escalate tensions in the region. I mean, he was very clear in that he's mentioned it, that this continued fighting has the risk of a great miscalculation by multiple actors, and I think this is what we've been seeing in different parts of the region, sadly. So we again appeal to all members of the international community to do everything in their power to prevent an escalation to the situation there. Because of the escalating tensions and the fragility of the situation in the region, we are calling for maximum restraint from all parties. We don't want any rash actions that could trigger further violence.
All right, so some big developments are taking place in this ongoing Israel-Hamas war. To make sense of it all, we're joined tonight on Global Lens by Colonel Myri Eisen, Director at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University in Israel. Welcome back, Colonel Eisen. Good to have you with us. Also joining me on the show tonight is Itai Melchior, Research and Advisor, Middle East and Africa Affairs, and former executive an Israeli National Security Council. He joins us live from Haifa in Israel. And completing the panel tonight is our Indian guest, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, defense and geopolitical expert, joining us from Delhi tonight. A warm welcome to all the guests. I'll request you to stay on with us. I need to take a quick break here on the show. On the other side, a complete analysis of all the major developments in the Israel-Hamas war.
Seeing is believing. Or is it? These are your favorite celebrities that you saw in the videos. But what if I told you that they are not?
Today, deepfake is one of the biggest challenges that the digital ecosystem is facing.
Cannot identify what is deepfake and what is real.
We have seen Rashmika Mandana go through the same thing, and this is becoming a common problem.
Everybody is going to be targeted.
The execution there's a laxity in our regulatory execution. In times to come, that is going to cost us a lot.
Welcome back to Global Lens. We're discussing the Israel-Hamas war. Let me go straight across to our panel of experts. Colonel Myri Eisen, let me begin with you. We were meant to discuss the killing of Saleh al-Arouri, Hamas's deputy leader in Lebanon, on this show tonight. But in just the last few hours, we've had the big breaking news coming in from Iran, where more than 100 people have been killed at an anniversary event that was meant to commemorate the 4th death anniversary of top Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani, as we know that he was killed in a US drone attack in 2020. My question to you, Colonel Eisen, and to the rest of the panel is simply this. We've seen in the last few days that Musavi is killed in Syria, correct me if I'm wrong, but by the US forces. Aruri is killed in Lebanon. Israel has not confirmed it, but it is widely believed that it is Israel indeed. And today blasts have been reported in Iran, at this Soleimani anniversary event. Are we seeing a pattern here? Is this Israel's new war strategy? Has Israel decided to go after the Hamas, Hezbollah and Quds network?
I think not, Neha. In this case, I would not compare the two targeted killings of whoever takes responsibility of a very top Iranian commander who was responsible for the entire relationship of bringing in weapons and capabilities from the Islamic regime of Iran to Hezbollah sitting in Damascus. He was killed. As you mentioned, Saleh al-Arouri was killed last night in Lebanon. Neither one do we have clear claims of responsibility, but that's the kind of thing that academically I would call targeting top echelon terrorists who have openly been involved in both the recruiting of terrorists, training of terrorists, bringing in money in a vast different way. The attack, as both of us are following it right now, of what happened in Iran, and yes, it's happened in Iran, but it's what we would call a terror attack. This was against civilians. They were going out to commemorate Soleimani, who, I don't want to be sarcastic about it, but Soleimani was an arch-terrorist as far as I'm concerned, but attacking crowds of people in a ceremony of a funeral is not the same kind of thing as targeting top terrorists. So I don't compare the three. I think that Iran has its own challenges of its own population who protest that same terrorist Islamic regime, and that this kind of attack that took place in the heart of Iran at a funeral memorial ceremony near the cemetery where Qasem Soleimani is buried, this is something that, as I look from the outside, domestic, going against that Islamic regime.
All right, Itai Melchior, is this a mere coincidence? Or are these events of the past few days clearly linked? Israel has said time and again that we will go after our enemies no matter where they are. Many Israeli leaders and defense officials have even named specific countries in the Arab world, saying we are not going to leave any stone unturned. Now, here on the show tonight, we're talking about more than 100 people who've been killed in twin blasts in Iran. These are people who were commemorating Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in a US drone strike 4 years ago. We're talking about how it is believed Israel carried out a strike near Beirut in Lebanon and killed Saleh al-Arouri, the number 2 or at least a very high profile figure in Hamas. And very recently, you also had the assassination of Iranian commander Sayyid Musavi in Syria. Again, suspected involvement of Israel there. I mean, are we to really understand that these are all unrelated events?
So, I mean, I think my colleague Colonel Eisen said it all. I will not confirm, I cannot confirm or nor deny that Israel was involved in those targeted killings, but I would actually put money on Israel not being involved in what happened in Iran today. This is not the Israeli way. Yes, we have vowed to fight our enemies. Yes, we will attack infrastructure which is used against Israel. But this is not the Israeli way to attack innocent civilians just for the fun of it. I mean, it's no purpose. We do know that Iran is marred with a big opposition, which is very unhappy with the leadership. And Soleimani was part of the leadership. So it does make sense that some terrorist organization would do this. Again, vile and totally uncalled for. We have no death wish for any Iranian civilian. They have not done us any harm. And as you said, we target military targets and try to do so very surgically, as you mentioned. Both the incidents you mentioned, both in Syria and in Lebanon, were people who were very much involved in arms smuggling, in management. Aruri was also the commander for Hamas for Judea and Samaria, also called the West Bank. And one of his targets was to turn the relatively peaceful, living side by side Palestinian Authority with Israel into a Gaza-like area, something which is very negative, and that's why his name has been up there in the list of people that are doing very, very bad actions and should be stopped. So no one in Israel has lost a tear on that.
Okay, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, let me come to you, sir. Do you buy what our Israeli guests are saying, that these events are completely unrelated? Because if you look at it, many would argue that there seems to be a pattern emerging here, and not only is Israel fighting Hamas in Gaza, it seems to be going after the Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah and Quds axis. And now it's very clear that the war is no longer confined to just Gaza. At least that is what many would argue.
Thank you, Neha, for inviting me. Now, it is not for us to aggregate or disaggregate what's happened in the course of last few days. There is a talk of IDF going in for phase 3 of the operation. Phase 1 being Gaza City, phase 2 being Khan Yunis, and phase 3 being creation of that buffer zone and targeted killings of people who are been involved into this one. So while Israel is not owned up for the killing of Musavi in Syria or of Arouri in Lebanon, but the fact is that what matters is perceptions. What are the global perceptions on this issue? In the killing of this Lebanese in Lebanon, there has been tweets here to say that Israel had not informed United States about this killing. And while the operation was on, the United States representatives were told that this operation is on. This is all available on X, which is X-Twitter. So, you know, there are perceptions being created all across saying that both of these were Israeli killings, and I don't want to aggregate and accept it or not accept it, because we are just truth is the first casualty in war. Nobody says the truth at all, so we can't say who has done it, but the perceptions are this. Now the third event which you are referring to, the one in Iran, is even more serious. When in 4 years ago Soleimani was hit and killed on 3rd of January 2000 I think.
2020,
that's
exactly 4 years
2020,
ago.
2020, 4 years ago. There were 2 missiles, and it was stated to be United States which had targeted it. And the Iranians had responded to this strike by hitting the bases of the United States in Iraq. And that was immediate response that the Iranians had done. Now, if the perceptions are such, and see, Soleimani was also disliked all over the world on various counts, because as overseas representative of the Quds or the IRGC, overseas worker. But the fact is that there is, he was respected in his own country as a military leader and an effective one that way. So if whatever happens in this case, it will be blamed again on the doorsteps of United States or Israel. Even if they're not done, even if it's an internal matter, the perceptions will be carried and they would be responsive. I'll also add one more issue here. The targeting of Aruri in Lebanon, in the suburbs of Beirut, that's actually a Hezbollah suburb, and which the place was given. And Aruri had met, this fellow Nasrullah in October, 2 months ago, when Nasrullah had visited Beirut from Qatar when he'd come. So, he was a senior figure in this whole game. When you hit in an area which is actually Hezbollah area in Beirut, there is an obvious spread. And Hezbollah is an army. They say they have a force of 150,000. God alone knows, nobody can count how many they have. And they would have about 100,000 rockets. Again, you can't be sure as what is the truth. But the fact is that, the Israeli representative or the spokesperson has said that we are prepared for a response from Lebanon, from Hezbollah side, means that they are prepared to accept that the Iron Dome will face a lot of bunch of these rockets flying in, overwhelm Iron Dome, as Iron Dome got overwhelmed on 7th of October. So, the fact is that this is possibility of expansion, possibility of conflagration in the region exists here. And I think it's not a fair idea. And I'll end by saying that this Congo thing, they copied all these immigrants that went to UK and they are now being transported to Rwanda. And then South Africa is now fighting something against Israel for humanitarian killings, etc. There is a distaste going across. There's an anger and anguish across large number of nations here. Also because their buffer zone is being created inside Gaza Strip. Now, if you take 60% of Gaza land and
what is left for the 2.3 million people? Exactly.
Where would the two? Exactly. And to say that they can be sent to Congo is already in fire for quite some years. Yes. So how are we going to happen? And Congo has got United Nations force happening there. So I think this conflagration, instead of controlling the issue, it is spreading beyond imagination, and it's not a good idea.
It doesn't augur well at all for the world at large. And I want to discuss the Congo issue in great detail because it's extremely controversial. Some of the statements that are being made by one Israeli minister after another. We're going to discuss that and more after this quick break. Stay with us.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
that lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Bangalore traffic is an example of something that has gone wrong with our system.
We have more than 50 flyovers in Bangalore city. If flyover is a solution to traffic problem, Bangalore should not have traffic problem.
According to TomTom Traffic Index 2022, Bangalore is ranked as the second worst city in the world when it comes to traffic.
The speed limit at the ORR is 80 kilometers per hour, but our vehicle has only moved 10 kilometers per hour.
What Bangalore needs is a surgery, but what we have been offered repeatedly are band-aids.
Only on the world's first news OTT. News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Since the last 2 years, Khalistani terror groups are threatening Indian diplomats in Canada, US, UK and Australia. Investigations of these threats led us to the first ever abduction and killing of an Indian diplomat, Ravindra Matre, in UK's Birmingham in 1984. Our months-long investigation finally led us to the murderer of Ravindra Matre, who has been hiding in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir for the last 40 years. Watch our exclusive documentary, Murder of an Indian Diplomat, where we reveal the man who killed Ravindra Matre.
Stop searching, start streaming. Download the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We are discussing the Israel-Hamas war. All right, let me go back to Colonel Myri Eisen. And I have two questions for both my Israeli guests, Colonel Eisen and Itai Melchior. I'll start with you, Colonel Eisen. Number one, what do you make of the fact that many believe, even if you do not want to link today's blasts that have taken place in Iran to the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, the fact that the Hamas deputy leader, Saleh al-Arouri, has been assassinated in Lebanon, and Lebanon, or at least Hezbollah, has vowed revenge or retaliation. What do you make of the fact that a lot of people see that this is going to significantly escalate the war in the region, that is no longer going to remain confined to Gaza? That's one. Two, what's with all the irresponsible and provocative statements that are being made by one Israeli minister after another? I'm not saying you speak for the Israeli government, but just look at some of these statements. Israel's intelligence minister says, the Gaza problem is not just our problem. The world should support humanitarian immigration because that's the only solution I know. Smotrich says that Palestinians should leave Gaza and make way for Israelis who can make the desert bloom. And then there is the notorious Ben Gvir, who says that this is an opportunity to concentrate on encouraging the migration of the residents of Gaza. Even the United States is appalled. And the US State Department has called these statements irresponsible and inflammatory. And, you know, when you have so many Israeli ministers who represent the Netanyahu government making such statements, can you blame people for saying that this is what Israel wants to do? Drive Palestinians out of Gaza?
Neha, I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to start with the first question and then I'll go to the second one. When it comes to Saleh al-Arouri, I would pose it for both of us to have a discussion. What do you do with arch terrorists? Are they allowed to have a safe haven anywhere? They overtly stand up and say, I did this. He took claim not just for the 7th of October. He's taken claim for many terror attacks against Israel. He's proud of it. He was effective. He did this for many years. So I'm just asking in that sense, is there a safe haven? Did Israel do it? Did somebody else do it? The man was living, the terrorist was living. He's a Palestinian from the West Bank. He sat in Israeli jail for many years. He was exported from Jordan to Syria. Syria kicked him out. He ended up in Lebanon. Lebanon is, I don't want to say lovely, but it is a failed state. Lebanon hosts Palestinian terror organizations, other jihadi terror organizations. I don't think Lebanon wants them. Hezbollah is not just any terror organization, it's Lebanese. And the attack against Saleh al-Arouri was in that Lebanese Beirut area that the Indian general so clearly defined before. When I look at that, I don't think that we should allow a top terrorist to feel safe anywhere. That's what I feel about it. I don't think that that enlarges the war. I think that it ends the war. I think that when terrorists feel safe, then they do attacks like October 7th. And because of that, I say that I don't know of any other way to get to terrorists than the way that perhaps Israel did against Saleh al-Arouri or whoever it was. When it comes to the Israeli government, I'm going to share with my amazing Indian audience, and as I speak with you, Neha, every once in a while, we get to talk to each other. Go online, not you, but our audience. There are 36 ministers in the Israeli government. Every single one of them has a different opinion. I think that we have lots of opinionated, different voices that I, Mary, personally very much disagree with, but I very much support freedom of opinion. The fact that they say it does not mean that it's policy. The fact that they tout it does not mean that anybody is going to do it. Does it do damage to Israel? Depends who you ask. The present Israeli government has very challenging voices in it, both within Israel and in the world. I, in my own analysis, at the head of the institute that I run, in our analysis, the option of having 2.3 million people moving from the Gaza Strip is not an option. If Minister Gila Gamliel says that, what she's expressing is what she'd like, but that's not something that's probably going to ever happen. Are there voices like that inside Israel? There are. And just like we have a variety of voices, some of which you think of as being more extreme, I but imagine that also in India, in a democracy, you have a variety of voices on policy. That doesn't mean that that's the policy that is enacted. So yes, the voices are there, Neha, but I do not think in any way that that's the policy, even of this present government in Israel. It certainly is not the one that they are touting. The prime minister has certainly never said so, and he's first among equal. And I say that because I really do believe that I'm going to listen to those voices. I oppose them, I say on a personal level, but I do not even think that it is the policy of this government of Israel.
I have to say, Colonel Eisen, it's very reassuring to hear you say that these Israeli ministers do not speak for Israelis like yourself. You know, no wonder this is referred to as the most far-right government ever in Israel's history. But at the end of the day, these three individuals that I've just quoted do represent the Netanyahu government. So let me put this question to Itai Melchior. Itai Melchior, your thoughts on these comments that have been made by three Israeli ministers, not one, not two, three of them. One is an interior minister, the other is an intelligence minister. The US State Department, no less, has said these remarks are inflammatory and irresponsible. And on top of that, what are we to make of the report that has come out in the Times of Israel, which says that Israeli officials have held clandestine talks with Congo and other countries for the potential acceptance of Gaza immigrants. Israeli sources have been quoted as saying Congo is willing to take in migrants and we're in talks with others. You know, and for Israel to then say we don't want to reoccupy Gaza. We don't want to take away Palestinian land from those people. We don't want to dispossess 2.3 million people. I think it will be very hard for people to take those claims being made by Israel at face value. And, you know, people still have horrific memories of what's happened over the decades, going all the way back to 1948.
Yes, as my colleague Eisen has already answered part of the question, let me shed a light on 3 other points which are related to your question. Let's start with the easiest. There are 2 Congos in Africa, neighboring countries. Most people confuse them and can't tell one from the other. The Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, and the other Congo neighboring Congo, Brazzaville, which is a neighboring country. Israel has good relations with the DRC, but I can tell you that just this Sunday, the results of the presidential elections were announced, and as we're speaking now, the results of the parliamentary elections are being announced. So therefore, I seriously doubt that anybody in the last few weeks in the DRC of any significance has been doing anything besides rallying, for sure not talking with Israel. And I also seriously doubt that the other Congo has been in talks with Israel about this. So therefore, I would kind of disregard this rumor that's going around. Maybe next time we speak, I'll be able to say something more definite about it. But for now, I really don't buy this. But as the same way as many Indians will very much like to shut their eyes and wake up in the world where there's no Pakistan and they're actually neighboring with Switzerland and Norway, the same way is true for Israelis. We've had so much grief from Gaza, and if it could just disappear, I know many have many left-wing, pro-peace, pro-two-state solution people that tell you that their real dream was for the Gaza problem to go away, and it is a problem. Now, you talk about things that are possible and not possible.
Okay, we seem to have lost the link there to Itai Melchior. Therefore, I'll put the same question to Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma. General Sharma, you know, some of our Israeli friends may say that we do not agree with these Israeli ministers. They don't speak for Israelis like us. But fact of the matter is, too many conflicting signals are emanating from Tel Aviv. While the Prime Minister may say we don't want to reoccupy Gaza, when you have 3 ministers in the Netanyahu government constantly talking about migration of Palestinians from Gaza, my question simply is, how are you going to trust Israel and its motives? Because there are obviously suspicions in the Arab world, going by some historical events, that Israel wants to drive Palestinians out of their land. And these utterances do not help Israel's cause at a time when it's already drawing so much flack from around the world for the growing death toll in Gaza.
So, Neha, it's very heartening, as you said, to listen to your Israeli guests on the panel, because they have explained that this may not be happening, especially because of the internal situation in Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, but having said that, you see, we learn from what has been published and what's been spoken about by the Israeli ministers, and they may not be consensus there, but they are speaking. Also, the Israeli media that publishes all these documents and information. So now, it's a newspaper called Zam Israeli, or Israel, that says that there is an expulsion policy which has already been debated in the cabinet, and the expulsion policy is also got some other name saying voluntary movement of Palestinians from there. Plus, there is also issue of a Philadelphia corridor. The Philadelphia corridor is a 14-kilometer belt which was decided in 1979 between Israel and Egypt, which is where the Rafah crossing is there, in the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza, which the Israelis want to now take over, including the Rafah crossing, which makes it that now there is an issue across with Egypt, because the Philadelphia corridor is being controlled by Egyptians. And then there is an issue of creating the buffer all around Gaza Strip. Naturally, it is absolutely understandable that Israel wants to protect itself from any attacks that emanate from closer to their borders with Gaza, which hit their settlements very close by. The fact is that the population is so large that it's impossible to create a buffer zone, take on the Philadelphia corridor also, box in from the sea, and then you expect these people to live there in that area, which as it is was very difficult. Now, Democratic Republic of Congo, though elections are on, there is a large tracts of land which are held by the rebels. And there is a United Nations force which is supposed to separate the rebel areas. And it's not been a very successful United Nations operations also over a period of time in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They may be discussing with other countries, as has been pointed out here. This is not, I think, a long-term solution. When any armed forces decide to go in, that end state ought to be visualized. Now to say that after Hamas as a political entity will be finished, and who will run the municipal facilities across in Gaza, which were being run by Hamas earlier, there will be no entity there. So, these people will have to move out. This end state has been spoken from 8th of October onwards by people. What will happen to Gaza after this war is finished? Now that Israel has withdrawn 5 brigades out of Gaza, the northern Gaza, there is a withdrawal of the armed forces. IDF is being withdrawn out of Gaza. Who will manage the void that is being created with the public there? And all 2.3 million Gazans have been displaced. They are not staying. Exactly. Everybody has moved to some area or the other. This is a great amount of calamity that's hitting us on our face in future. And, international community also has to get involved. You can't have such a large number of people displaced here. Understandably, in this manner, one tends to support that it's the right of Israel to protect itself from something that can go wrong from Gaza. But then you have to be mindful of also innocent people, mass innocent people. We have seen migrations taking place when we got independent between India and Pakistan, and so much hell had broken loose. And people carry the scars over 75 years. But even now we carry the scars. How would you do this in Gaza?
But dispossession of 2.3 million people, I mean, you can't have a situation like that. And, that is something that a lot of people, at least in the Arab world, fear. Since I'm running out of time, Itai Melchior, I'll quickly come across to you. We'd lost our link with you. A new poll in Israel clearly suggests that just about 15% of Israelis want to see Benjamin Netanyahu continue as Prime Minister once this war is over, and most prefer centrist leader Benny Gantz over him. Of course, Benny Gantz is also in the current war cabinet. How much trouble do you think this spells for Benjamin Netanyahu?
It's a good question that has many ramifications that could fill a whole show in itself. For example, since you are not the only one reading those polls, and also Netanyahu himself, what is he going to do in the short time he has left? If we think that after the main part of the war, there will be election and Gantz will leave the government, and maybe he has to make some quick wins. Where is he going to be looking for that? Is peace with Saudi Arabia in the cards? There are many questions to be asked as ramifications. But as our late President Shimon Peres, also former Prime Minister, once said, polls, he said, are like flowers. You can smell the good smell, but don't eat them or something like that. But the idea is that we are far away from elections. I can't see elections before half a year from now and maybe later. So therefore, yes, it's true. That's the sentiment that everybody feels. There's a lot of anger against the government. Gantz is seen as the hero and the savior, and the fact that he was the opposition leader. He was not the opposition leader, but he was the only leader from opposition that stepped up and entered the government and gave it the unity it needed, gave him many points in the Israeli public. So yes, that is the sentiment now. Will it be the sentiment when we go to the polls one day? Different question.
Who knows? But you're right that right now the focus is on the war, and the same poll suggests that a majority of Israelis do support the Netanyahu government's war effort. On that note, Colonel Myri Aysen, Itai Melchior, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, thank you so much to all three of you for joining me on Global Lens. I look forward to having all of you back on the show. All right, let's now shift our focus to a big story that has emanated from the United States in the last 24 hours and, well, it is linked to the Israel-Hamas war. The beleaguered president of Harvard University has decided to step down after coming under ferocious attacks for her handling of anti-Semitism during protests over the war in Gaza, as well as allegations that she had plagiarized in her academic work. Claudine Gay was criticized in recent months after reports surfaced alleging that she did not properly cite scholarly sources. Gay was also engulfed by scandal after she declined to say unequivocally whether calling for a genocide of Jews violated Harvard's code of conduct. This happened during a testimony before the US Congress alongside the heads of MIT and the University of Pennsylvania last month. Gay, who made history as the first black person to be president of the powerhouse university, has said in her resignation letter that she had been subjected to personal threats and racial animus. Her downfall comes after Harvard's governing body, the Harvard Corporation, had initially backed her after the public relations disaster of the congressional testimony. Subsequently, more than 70 lawmakers, including 2 Democrats, called for her resignation, while a number of high-profile Harvard alumni and donors also called for her departure.
Harvard President Claudine Gay on Tuesday said she would resign from her position, ending a 6-month tenure marred by allegations of plagiarism and backlash over her congressional testimony about anti-Semitism on campus on December 5th.
And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
At the testimony, Gay and other university presidents were criticized for failing to definitively say that calls for the genocide of Jews constituted bullying and harassment on campus. Gay, the first black president in Harvard's 388-year history, had come under pressure to resign from Harvard's Jewish community and some members of Congress over her comments, while also facing several allegations of plagiarism for her academic work in recent months. In a letter to the Harvard community, Gay said her decision to step down had been difficult beyond words, adding, quote, "After consultation with members of the Harvard Corporation, it has become clear that it is in the best interest of Harvard for me to resign so that our community can navigate this moment of extraordinary challenge with a focus on the institution rather than any individual." The Harvard Corporation, the university's 11-member governing body, said in an email to the community that its members had accepted Gay's resignation with sorrow, and that the school's provost and chief academic officer, Alan Garber, would take over as interim president.
Our next story too is from the United States, but it has an India connection. The deaths of a wealthy Indian origin couple and their daughter in the US state of Massachusetts last week have been ruled a murder-suicide by medical authorities after an autopsy. 57-year-old Rakesh Kamal, his 54-year-old wife Tina Kamal and their 18-year-old college-going daughter Ariana Kamal were found dead in their $5 million mansion in Dover, Massachusetts on the 28th of December. A firearm was found near Rakesh Kamal. A press release issued by the medical authorities say autopsy results confirm that Tina and her daughter Ariana were victims of homicide by gunshot. Rakesh died from a gunshot wound consistent with being self-inflicted. The firearm, though, was not registered in Rakesh's name and he was not licensed to possess it. Last week, authorities had said that the initial investigation indicated the incident was a cause of domestic violence and did not indicate the involvement of outside parties. The family's sprawling mansion, estimated to be worth over $5 million, went into foreclosure a year ago and was sold for $3 million, according to reports. The Kamals purchased the 19,000 square foot estate, which boasts of 11 bedrooms and 14 bathrooms, for $4 million in 2019. The family lived in one of the richest neighborhoods in Massachusetts. Tina and her husband had previously run a now defunct education systems company. The couple appear to have faced financial problems in recent years, according to online records. Their company was launched in 2016, but was dissolved in December 2021. All right, let's now get to our next story from the United Kingdom, and this is quite a first. The police in the UK are investigating the first case of an alleged rape in a virtual reality game after a 16-year-old girl was sexually attacked in the online metaverse. The girl is said to have been left distraught after her avatar, her digital character, was gang raped by online strangers. The teen was wearing a virtual reality headset in an immersive game when she was allegedly raped by a group of men. Though she did not sustain any physical injury, investigating officers say she suffered the same emotional and psychological trauma as someone who has been raped in the real world. This case is believed to be the first virtual sexual offence investigated by the police. An official has been quoted as saying this case poses a number of challenges for law enforcement, given that the current legislation is not set up for this. It remains unclear what game the teenage girl was playing at the time of the alleged offence. The investigation into the landmark case has also prompted questions about whether the police should be pursuing virtual offences, given that the police and the prosecutors are currently struggling with an enormous backlog of actual rape cases. However, UK Home Secretary James Cleverly has defended the virtual reality rape probe, saying the child has gone through sexual trauma. He said, and I quote, "I know it is easy to dismiss this as not being real, but the whole point of these virtual environments is that they are incredibly immersive. It's also worth realizing that somebody who's willing to put a child through a trauma like that digitally may well be someone who could go on to do terrible things in the physical realm." And as we wrap up Global Lens tonight, we have some interesting news for you from Paris. Louis Vuitton, popularly referred to as LV, is one of the first names we can think of when it comes to luxury fashion brands. After creating iconic fashion statements for years, the brand is all set to expand its wings in the world of hospitality. LV plans to transform its current corporate headquarters in Paris into a luxury hotel. Reportedly, the LV hotel will debut at 103 Champs-Élysées in 2026, where Christian Dior had earlier announced their plans to open their headquarters and new superstore. Known globally for its high-end fashion, the LV hotel is expected to have all things luxurious. The hotel is projected to cover almost 6,000 square miles and is said to be located beside Louis Vuitton's largest store in the world. It is said this hotel will be designed to resemble a giant Louis Vuitton briefcase adorned with buckles. Although this will be a first-of-its-kind initiative by the fashion mogul, they have earlier collaborated with various restaurants for food and fashion pop-up experiences in various cities across the globe. Well, for lovers of fashion, luxury and food, this certainly is something to look forward to in 2026. That's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. If you have been, thanks for watching. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow.
Yes, the scale of the attack surprised us.
When you get a series of alerts, 16 intelligence alerts, if Maharashtra government at that time had alerted the Coast Guard and the Navy, this 2611 would not have happened at all.
And one of the details they had planned was to use these dhagas to mislead the investigative agencies.
All this was to be presented as a Hindu terror. It was a